About simplifying algebraic expressions. Our learning target is I can simplify expressions by distributing and combining like terms. If you remember, combining like terms we've been talking about the last few days. We'll kind of refresh that a little bit before talking about the distributive property. And then our standard is understand that rewriting an expression in different forms in a problem can shed light on how quantities are related. So that's all about finding equivalent expressions, which we know are just the same thing written in a different way. So to get started, let's talk a little bit about vocabulary. This is stuff that we have seen before. I just want to make sure that we don't forget any of these things. We want to constantly review. So to simplify just means that we're going to be writing in lowest terms. I've also highlighted terms here because that was a new word for us this week. Terms are pieces of an expression that are separated by plus or minus signs. So remember, that can be a variable, it can be a number, it can be the product of a number and a variable, the quotient of a number and a variable. The important thing is that they're always separated by addition or subtraction. And then just to refresh our memory on what an algebraic expression is, that's an expression that has a variable, at least one variable, some numbers, and some operations. It does not have an equal sign. That's when we're working with equations. We've talked about those differences. And then a coefficient is the number that is in front of a variable. It's what's being multiplied by a variable. So if we had 3x, 3 is our coefficient. And then lastly, we have a constant, and that's just a number by itself. So that could be a -4, +8. Remember, those can be decimals or fractions also, but there is no variable attached. So when we get into solving or simplifying algebraic expressions, we've got a couple different strategies. The first one was combining like terms. We've talked about that the last few days. Can anybody remember what has to be true in order for terms to be like terms? Very good. They have to have the same variable and the same exponent if there is an exponent on that variable. And we've been practicing by marking different shapes or different colors around the like terms. So just to review, 4x and 9x would be like terms. In this case, we take that sign in front of the of each coefficient so that we know what we're doing. A positive 2y minus y. Remember, if there's no coefficient in front of it, the coefficient is 1. So in this case, it's -1. And then we have the constants of 3 and 6 that will combine to be like terms as well. So 4x minus 9x gives us -5x. 2y minus y gives us 1y or just y. And then 3 plus 6 gives us 9. So our simplified expression would be -5x plus y plus 9. Now just to make sure we remember, 3m squared plus 4m minus 11. 3m squared and 4m are not like terms, even though they have the same variable, because on the first term, the m has an exponent of 2. So the exponents have to be the same as well. So make sure we're remembering that and paying attention to that. So on example 2, that expression is already simplified. There are no like terms that we can combine. So moving on with distributive property, this is another way that we can rewrite expressions or simplify them to be in fewer terms. Distribute just means you're giving it out. So we're going to take the outside term or the term that's outside those parentheses and distribute it to every piece and every term that is inside those parentheses using multiplication. So what that looks like is we would have something like 5 times the quantity, -2w plus 3. We find that outside number, which in this case is 5, and we distribute it to every part inside. And we're using multiplication for that. We see that because 5 is side by side with the parentheses. There's no operator in between, so that means multiplication. So that looks like 5 times -2w plus 5 times 3. And then we just have to simplify from there. 5 times -2w is -10w. 5 times 3 is 15. Once we've simplified as much as we can, we're finished. Now from this point, sometimes you will have like terms and you can combine, but these two are not like terms because one has a w, one is a constant. So we're going to do a couple more examples, and then you guys will have some practice with your partners. So another one, this one looks a little bit different, but it still has a number that is outside parentheses that's being multiplied by everything in parentheses. So even if it's behind, that still works. We take that 7. Now you won't always have a multiplication sign in between. Sometimes it'll be side by side with those parentheses. And we distribute it to every part of what is inside. So that looks like 7 times 6 plus a 7 times negative 4k. 7 times 6 is 42, plus 7 times negative 4k is negative 28k. But we know plus a negative can be simplified to be written as just minus 28k. So that's all there is to it. You take the outside number, multiply it by everything inside. Sometimes, though, you might not have a number outside, you might just have a negative. And that's the same case as if you don't have a coefficient in front of a term and you just have a negative in front. That's like a -1 that we are going to distribute to everything. So -1 times x plus -1 times 8. That gives us negative x minus 8. And that's all we've got to do. So now it's time for you guys to practice some with your partners. I'll be walking around if you need any help.